Imagine being so exhausted you can barely stand, only to find yourself cornered by people who want to hurt you. That's exactly what happened to Chloe Miller. Her chair scraped hard against the floor as she stumbled, her balance completely gone when a heavy hand shoved her shoulder. Cruel laughter filled the diner, as if her fear meant nothing at all. Coffee cups stayed frozen in midair. Conversations just died out. A nurse, shaking from exhaustion and totally alone, stood trapped between two boys who thought the entire world belonged to them. No one moved a muscle. No one said a word, until the door finally opened. Heavy boots hit the tile with a slow, steady rhythm. A U.S. Marine stepped inside, and right next to him, a German shepherd froze, its eyes locked on something no one else had noticed yet. In that moment, everything was about to change. Welcome back to Cool Drama Stories. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. If this story moves you, please smash that like button and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The October wind cut through Bozeman like a sharp blade, dragging the freezing air across the quiet streets and rattling the windows of a small roadside diner just off Main Street. Chloe Miller pushed against the glass door with way more effort than it should have taken. The faint jingle of the bell above her head sounded much louder than usual, like it was echoing right inside her own skull. She paused just inside the entrance, blinking under the harsh fluorescent lights, her body swaying for a second before she caught herself. 32 hours without a single minute of sleep will do that to you. It makes the whole world feel like it's on a delay, like everything is happening a fraction of a second too late to catch properly. Emily was 29 years old, tall and a bit too thin from years of skipping meals during her long hospital shifts. Her pale skin had that faint gray look that comes from being tired for a long time. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a loose, messy bun that had started out neat at the beginning of her shift, but now soft strands were escaping and hanging around her face. There were deep shadows under her hazel eyes, the kind that don't go away with sleep anymore, but just fade enough to pretend they aren't permanent. She was still wearing her light blue scrubs under a worn-out beige coat. The fabric was a bit wrinkled and carried that sterile scent of hospital antiseptic that never really seemed to leave her anymore. But here is the crazy part. She had always been the kind of person who stayed behind when everyone else left. She was the one who volunteered for the extra shifts and said yes when someone else called in sick. She would stand at a patient's bedside long after her paperwork was finished because walking away just felt wrong to her. It had earned her a lot of respect at Graymont Memorial Hospital, but it also brought a quiet kind of loneliness that comes from always putting everyone else first. Right now, all she wanted in the world was coffee. Just a simple cup of coffee to help her feel human again before she drove home and collapsed into her bed. The diner looked exactly like every other small-town place she had ever stepped into. There were red vinyl booths with cracked seams, a long counter with stools that spun around, and a faint smell of burnt coffee mixed with grease and something sweet that might have been pancakes. A few early customers were scattered throughout the room, construction workers in heavy jackets, a man reading a newspaper, and an elderly couple sharing a plate of toast in silence. It felt normal, safe, and easy to forget. Emily moved carefully down the narrow aisle. Her steps were slow and measured, which is how you walk when your brain feels like it's trying to work through a thick fog. She kept her eyes low, not because she was afraid, but just out of habit. Hospitals teach you that making eye contact usually invites questions, and questions require energy she simply didn't have left. She didn't even notice the two men at first. But you won't believe what happens next, because they definitely noticed her. The two young guys standing in the middle of the aisle looked like they had never heard the word no in their entire lives. They had that effortless, annoying confidence that usually comes with a lot of money and zero consequences. The taller one, Logan Brooks, was broad-shouldered with blonde hair that was styled way too perfectly to be an accident. He was wearing a dark designer jacket over a hoodie that probably cost more than Emily's entire monthly grocery bill. His jaw was sharp, and he had this permanent smirk on his face, like the whole world was just a show put on for his personal entertainment. Right next to him was Simon Ward. He was a bit shorter, but more heavily built, with dark hair and a watch that caught the overhead lights every time he moved his hand. He had this restless, twitchy energy about him, the kind of vibe that tells you boredom makes him dangerous for everyone around him. They were laughing loudly about something as Emily walked toward them, their voices filling up the whole space. If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure to smash that like button. Then Tyler's gaze flicked over to her, pausing to size her up. His smile changed into something sharper as he stepped right into her path. Not enough to look like a move, but enough to block her way. "Hey," he said, "careful there." Emily slowed down, trying to just adjust her movement and pass around him. "Excuse me," she said softly. Her voice was steady, the tone of someone who had spent years de-escalating tense situations without even thinking about it. But here is the crazy part. Marcus moved too, blocking the other side. It wasn't an obvious wall, just enough of a hurdle to make things inconvenient. "Oh, sorry," Marcus said, though he didn't move an inch. "Didn't see you there." They both grinned at her, and that's when Emily felt it. It wasn't fear yet, but it was something cold. It was recognition. She had seen this exact dynamic before, but not in diners. She'd seen it in hospital rooms and waiting areas. She knew exactly how people acted when they believed there would be no consequences for their behavior. "Can you let me through?" she asked, still keeping her voice calm and controlled. Tyler tilted his head, studying her like she was some kind of puzzle. "Long night." Emily didn't answer him. "You're in scrubs, right?" Marcus added, his voice light but with a mean edge to it. "Are you a nurse or something?" Emily gave a single nod.
"Yes." Tyler's smile got even wider. "Figures. You look like you're about to fall over right here. By the way, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next part of this story." A few other people in the shop turned their heads to look. They didn't really intervene, they just watched enough to notice what was happening. Emily shifted her weight, trying once more to get past them. Her shoulder accidentally brushed against Tyler's arm, but he didn't budge. "You really should sit down," he said, sounding totally casual. "We wouldn't want you collapsing on someone, would we?" Marcus snorted at that. Emily's fingers tightened slightly on the strap of her bag. Her body felt heavy now, and the exhaustion was pressing down harder than ever. She was reacting just a fraction slower than she should have been, but her brain was still working. She was calculating the distance and her options, the same way she would with a patient who was becoming unpredictable. But here, there were no hospital protocols. There was no security team just a phone call away. There were just people pretending they didn't see what was happening. "I'm fine," she said, "please move." "Or what?" Marcus asked, turning to face her fully now. That question just hung there in the air much longer than it should have. Emily didn't have an answer, because there wasn't an answer that would make this situation better. That was the worst part of it all, not the words, or even the tone. It was the absolute certainty they had. They knew they could keep doing this and nothing would stop them. Behind the counter, the clerk, a guy named Jake, was watching the whole scene.
He was in his late 50s with a tired face and a permanent slump to his shoulders. His hand hovered near the phone for a second, but then he slowly lowered it again. He'd seen stuff like this before, and he knew how it usually ended. Emily took a breath and tried one more time to step around them. Which of these guys do you think is the real troublemaker? Drop a comment and let me know. Wait until you see how this bully reacts when a real professional walks through the door. Tyler shifted his weight again, looking for a reaction. Marcus just let out a cold laugh, and that's when Tyler finally reached out. He wasn't being violent or aggressive yet, but he firmly closed his fingers around her wrist. "Hey," he muttered, "we're just having a little conversation here." In that exact moment, Emily's entire body went completely still. It wasn't because of how hard he was gripping her. It was the memory it triggered. All those times she'd seen her own patients flinch when someone touched them without warning. It was that awful feeling of someone taking control of your personal space in a small, sneaky way. "Let go of me," she said. Her voice sounded totally different now. It was lower, sharper, and held a lot of authority. Tyler hesitated for just a tiny fraction of a second, but then that annoying smirk spread across his face again. If you're finding this story intense so far,
make sure to smash that like button. Outside, in the parking lot, a large pickup truck pulled into the diner's gravel space. The engine made a soft ticking sound as it started to cool down in the chilly morning air. The driver's door swung open, and a tall man stepped out into the cold.
This was Staff Sergeant Owen Scott. He moved with the steady, focused energy of someone who had spent years in places where hesitating for even a second could get people hurt. He was 34 years old, broad-shouldered, and built like a tank. His presence had a quiet weight to it that didn't even need to be announced. He was wearing his olive-green Marine Corps field uniform, and it fit him like a second skin. His sleeves were rolled up neatly, and his tan combat boots pressed firmly into the gravel with every step he took. His face was sharp, with a strong jaw and a bit of light stubble on his cheeks. There was a faint scar cutting right through his eyebrow, a little souvenir from a deployment he never talked about. His dark brown hair was cut in a clean military style, and his eyes were a cold, observant blue. They didn't miss a single thing. But here's the crazy part. He wasn't alone. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens when they get inside. Stepping down right beside him was his K9 partner, Rex. Rex was a 6-year-old German Shepherd, and he was absolutely massive. His fur was a rich amber color with black markings across his back, and you could see his powerful muscles moving smoothly under his coat as he walked. His ears were straight up and alert, and his posture was perfectly controlled. He wasn't just a pet. He was a highly trained working dog who had spent years alongside Owen in high-risk environments. You could see the intelligence in his eyes, a constant awareness that matched his handler perfectly. Owen closed the truck door and started walking toward the diner entrance. But then, Rex stopped just short of the door. His whole body went stiff, his ears angled forward, and a low, almost silent growl started deep in his chest. His eyes were locked onto something happening inside. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Owen noticed the change in his dog immediately. He didn't have to ask any questions because he trusted Rex completely. He looked through the glass and scanned the interior of the diner in one single, practiced sweep. He saw the layout, the people, and the thick tension hanging in the room. Then he saw her, a woman in medical scrubs, backed into a corner, with a man's hand clamped onto her wrist. Something in Owen's expression shifted. It wasn't a huge, dramatic change, but if you were paying attention, you'd know he had just gone from neutral to decisive. He reached for the door handle and stepped inside. The diner didn't exactly get quiet when Owen walked in, but everything felt sharper, like the volume on reality had been turned up. You could hear the scrape of a fork on a plate, the hum of the fridge, and the uneven breathing of a woman who clearly hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Owen didn't need to ask what was happening. He could read the room perfectly just by looking at their bodies. He saw how the tall guy was standing way too close, and how Chloe Miller's shoulders were pulled tight. She wasn't acting out of fear, but out of restraint, the kind you use when you know that reacting will only make things worse. Owen had seen that look before, and he knew it always meant the same thing. Which character do you think is going to crack first? Let me know in the comments. Things had already crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed.
Let her go. Ryan's voice was flat and steady.
It wasn't a loud shout meant to start a fight, but it was impossible for anyone to ignore. Logan Brooks turned around slowly, a look of annoyance on his face that quickly turned into curiosity. He looked Ryan up and down, checking out his boots, his uniform, and the way he carried himself. It was obvious Ryan didn't belong in a place like this. Tyler was used to sizing people up fast, deciding who was a threat and who wasn't. But Ryan was different. He didn't fit into any of the categories Tyler understood. That lack of control made him even more irritated than the interruption did. "We're just talking," Tyler said, finally letting go of Emily's wrist as if he'd planned to do it all along. His voice was smooth, but you could hear the mean edge hiding underneath. "If you're enjoying this so far, smash that like button." Simon Ward didn't budge. He kept blocking half the path, his big frame leaning forward like he was testing the waters, just waiting to see what would happen. But before Ryan could even make a move, Rex stepped in. The German Shepherd moved perfectly, placing himself right between Emily and the two men. He wasn't growling or jumping, he was just being a solid wall. It was a clear message that didn't need words. His golden brown eyes were locked onto Marcus, watching every tiny twitch and even the way he breathed. This was exactly what a professional canine was trained to do. A deep vibration started in the dog's chest. It was so quiet you could barely hear it, but the whole energy shifted instantly. Marcus felt the change, even if he couldn't quite put his finger on why. His confident smirk slipped for just a second.
Now this is where it gets interesting. Ryan didn't say it again, and he didn't get aggressive. He just stood there with his weight balanced and his hands relaxed. He looked like a man who had nothing to prove because he already knew how the story ended. "Step back," he said, even softer this time. Somehow, that lower volume made the words feel much heavier. Emily was the first to move. As soon as there was a gap, she darted past Rex. Her shoulder brushed against Ryan's arm, and for a split second, her body felt a wave of relief, before her brain could even process it. It was a sharp, sudden feeling that almost hurt. She didn't stop until she hit the edge of the counter, grabbing it to keep herself steady. Her heart was still pounding in her chest. Hit subscribe and tap the bell, so you don't miss the next one. She couldn't believe this stranger was helping her. He didn't even know her, yet here he was, standing between her and trouble, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The whole thing could have ended right there, but Marcus couldn't stand the feeling of backing down, especially not in. Wait until you see how fast a hero can be turned into a villain, because Ryan was about to find out the hard way. If you're enjoying this story so far, smash that like button, and let's keep going. Ryan pivoted smoothly, using almost no force at all. He just hooked his foot behind Tyler's ankle, at the perfect moment to break his balance. Tyler slammed into the floor, the air leaving his lungs in a sharp gasp that filled the entire diner. Marcus went down half a second later, dragged by his own momentum, as Ryan pinned his arm, just enough to stop him from fighting back.
It was all over in seconds. No punches, no mess, just total control. Rex didn't even move. He just stood there, his eyes watching every single movement, ready to act if things changed. For a long moment, nobody said a word. The entire diner seemed to freeze in that second where everyone knew exactly what happened, but no one was ready to admit it out loud. But here's the crazy part, the truth was about to be completely twisted. A phone went up as Eric Dalton started recording with shaking hands. He hadn't seen the start of the fight or the first shove, only the very end, Ryan standing over two men on the ground, looking perfectly calm and unshaken. That was the part that would matter. That was the part that would spread. Tyler saw the camera and his face changed instantly. His shock turned into fake outrage for the phone. "Did you see that?" he shouted, pushing himself up halfway so everyone could hear. "He just attacked us." Marcus joined in immediately, clutching his wrist and breathing hard like he was badly hurt. "He grabbed me out of nowhere," he cried. Emily stepped forward, her anger finally breaking through her fear. "That's not what happened," she yelled. But it didn't matter. The fake story was already coming together. Hit subscribe and tap the bell right now so you don't miss how this lie grows. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Tyler was already on his phone, making a call. "Dad," he said, his voice steady and serious, "we've got a major situation down here." Ryan stepped back and let Marcus go, giving them space.
He had seen this before, in different uniforms and different countries. The moment where the truth becomes secondary to who can control the story the fastest. 10 minutes later, the diner door opened again. Victor Hale didn't rush. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing an expensive coat that screamed money and power. He walked in like he already owned the place. He looked at Tyler first, then Marcus, checking them over. Only then did he look at Ryan, and it wasn't with curiosity. It was like he was looking at something that needed to be thrown away. Behind him came Officer Lawson, a big man who knew when to follow the law and when to follow the people with money. Next to him was the younger Officer Ruiz, his eyes searching for the line between what was right and what was expected. "He assaulted them," Tyler said right away. "Stay." The command was sharp and final. Rex froze instantly, even though every muscle in his body wanted to follow his master. Emily stood there, her breathing shallow and fast, as she watched Ryan being led toward the exit. This was the man who had stepped in to protect her without a second thought. He didn't know her name, and he didn't ask for a single thing in return. But now he was the one being taken away in handcuffs. The bell above the door chimed again as it opened, and this time, Nobody even tried to look away. The truth wasn't going to wait for anyone to catch up. By the time the sun rose higher over the town of Bozeman, a very specific version of the story was already spreading like wildfire, and it was dangerously simple. Wait until you hear how quickly a hero can be turned into a monster when the cameras only catch half the story.
If you think Ryan was just doing the right thing, smash that like button right now to show your support for the truth. A 30-second video clip, shaky but clear enough, showed a Marine in uniform taking down two young men inside a diner. There was no context at all. No shot of the initial shove. No mention of the hand gripping Emily's wrist. It was just the moment of impact, replayed over and over again, stripped of everything that had happened before the recording started. Chloe Miller saw the video for the first time on her phone, while she was standing out in the cold. It was because of the way her stomach dropped as the video looped. Her name hadn't been mentioned yet, but she recognized the angle and the framing. She knew the exact second Eric had hit the record button. The comments were already piling up underneath the post. People were using words like violent, unstable, and another military problem brought home. She felt something heavy twisting deep in her chest. It was worse than anger. It was a total sense of helplessness. She knew the truth, but she could see it being buried right in front of her eyes. He didn't even think twice. Someone muttered behind her, watching the same clip over her shoulder. He just slammed them into the ground. Emily turned around quickly. "You didn't see what happened before that," she said, her voice tight and controlled only by sheer effort. The man just shrugged his shoulders, already looking back down at his phone screen. "Doesn't matter," he said. "That's what people are seeing." That was the real problem. But here is the crazy part. The truth was hiding in plain sight, and Emily was the only one looking for it. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss how this cover-up unfolds. Inside the diner, the energy had shifted again. It wasn't tense anymore, just uneasy. It was as if everyone had realized, too late, that they were part of something much bigger than a simple argument. Jake was moving behind the counter faster than before, scrubbing surfaces that didn't even need cleaning, and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Eric sat in the same seat, staring at his phone and replaying his own footage. His face was pale, and his jaw was clenched tight. He knew exactly what he had recorded, but he also knew exactly what he hadn't. Emily stepped back inside, and the bell above the door seemed to ring softer this time. Or maybe she just couldn't hear it as clearly over the noise in her head. Her exhaustion was finally catching up to her, pressing down harder with every passing minute. But the tiredness didn't dull her thoughts. Instead, it sharpened them in a way that made everything feel urgent. Ryan was in custody. The video was spreading. If she didn't do something, that lie would be the only story people ever knew. "Someone else recorded it," she said, her voice louder now, forcing the people in the room to pay attention. There was a woman sitting over there in the corner. She pointed toward the booth. She had her phone out before anything even started. A few people in the diner exchanged looks. One of the construction workers nodded his head slowly. "Yeah, I saw her. An older lady with gray hair. She left right after the police showed up." Emily took a deep breath to steady herself. Did anyone talk to her? Does anyone know who she is? Only silence answered her. Of course, nobody did. People saw things, but they didn't usually follow up. Emily closed her eyes for a second, forcing her thoughts into a neat order. Think. Don't just react. Think. It was the same mental command she used in the trauma room when things were moving way too fast and lives were on the line. Which part of this situation surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments below. She asked herself what she'd tell anyone else in this mess. Simple. Find the witness, grab the evidence, and act before it all vanishes. Without saying another word, she turned and headed for the door. Outside, the freezing air slapped her face again, grounding her in a way the fluorescent lights couldn't. Rex was still there, exactly where Ryan had left him, sitting upright and unmoving. He sat perfectly still, his breathing slow and steady in the cold air. "He isn't coming back right away," Emily whispered, more to herself than the dog. "But I'm going to fix this, I promise." Rex watched her, then stood up. It was a small movement, but it changed the vibe. He didn't leave his post entirely,
but he shifted just enough to show he was ready for action. Just then, a car door slammed somewhere behind them. Emily spun around. An older woman was walking toward her, moving quickly despite the biting cold. Her posture was straight and her movements were very deliberate. She looked to be in her early 70s, her gray hair tied back loosely with a few strands escaping around her temples. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and full of awareness. She wore a simple, practical coat that was worn at the edges, the kind of clothes you pick for function, not fashion.
"Are you looking for me?" she asked. Emily blinked, surprised. "You were in the diner." Margaret Dawson nodded once. "I was." She held up her phone. "And I didn't leave because I was scared. I left because I knew this would happen. Now this is where things get really interesting." Emily stepped closer, her heart racing. "You recorded it." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "From the very second those boys started blocking your path." Those words hit Emily hard because they changed everything. "Can I see it?" Emily asked. Margaret studied her for a moment, measuring her. Then she unlocked her phone and turned the screen. The video was clear and steady, filmed from a corner booth. Emily saw everything: Tyler blocking her, Marcus trapping her, the moment her wrist was grabbed, and the shove. Then, she saw Ryan step in. He wasn't aggressive or reckless. He was precise and in total control. It was all there. If you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next part. Emily let out a long, slow breath. "This proves everything," she said. Margaret nodded. "It does, but proof doesn't matter if no one is willing to listen to it." Emily looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Then we'll make them listen." A tiny smile touched Margaret's face. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No," Emily replied firmly. "I'm not." But just then, a dark sedan pulled into the lot. It was smooth, quiet, and expensive without being flashy. A man stepped out, fixing his coat as he walked. He was in his late 30s, tall and lean, with sharp features and neat black hair. He was clean-shaven and moved with the kind of confidence that comes from controlling a situation. His suit was understated but perfectly tailored, and his eyes scanned the area before landing on Emily. "Chloe Miller?" he asked. Emily turned, wary but focused. "Yes." The man gave a short nod. "Daniel Park. I'm an attorney." "Former JAG." Emily stared at him, stunned. "How do you even know about this?" "I've already seen the footage," Daniel said, his voice calm and steady. "But not the video you're thinking of." He pointed to the phone in Margaret's hand. "The other one. The one that's currently going viral." His expression turned serious. "And I've already been in touch with someone who knows the man they just put in handcuffs." If you're enjoying this story so far, smash that like button. Emily felt a shift deep inside. It wasn't quite relief yet, but for the first time, she had a sense of direction. "He didn't do anything wrong," she said quickly. "I know," Daniel answered. "The problem is proving that in a way that actually holds up in court. And I'm guessing you're the key to making that happen." Margaret didn't speak at first. She just watched him, sizing him up carefully. Finally, she gave a firm nod. Daniel let out a quiet breath. "Good," he said, "because we are running out of time." Emily looked at them both. She was still exhausted, but a sharp focus was taking over. Ryan was behind bars, and the story was spreading fast. But now, for the first time, things were finally in motion. It wasn't just a reaction anymore, it was a strategy. But here's the crazy part. The fight was moving from the streets to the courtroom. The silence in the courtroom felt totally different from the silence in the diner. It was heavier, more structured, and strictly controlled. It was the kind of quiet where every word had weight because it would be recorded and remembered forever. Cold morning light poured through the tall windows, hitting the benches packed with people. Most of them already had an opinion they weren't quite ready to admit out loud. Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Chloe Miller sat near the front, hands gripped tightly in her lap. Her exhaustion was hidden under a sharp focus, the same kind she used in the ICU when a life was on the line. Across the room, Owen Scott stood by his lawyer. His shoulders were squared, even in a suit. He looked older here. You could see the hard lines in his face and the scar on his brow, a reminder of the blast in Helmand Province that nearly took his life years ago. At his feet, Rex the German Shepherd lay perfectly still. He had a sense of discipline that matched Owen's own control. His ears were up, scanning the room for danger. Now this is where it gets interesting. At the prosecution table, Miranda Cross adjusted her files. She was in her early 50s, with silver hair and a look of authority. She was famous for turning doubt into a conviction. When she stood up, she didn't rush. She didn't have to. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began. Her voice was persuasive. "This case isn't about intent. It's about actions. A trained Marine used force against 2 unarmed civilians in public." She let the words sink in, looking the jurors in the eye. "War training has no place in a neighborhood diner." Emily felt her jaw tighten.
Her story was too simple. Which side do you think has a stronger argument? Let me know in the comments. Daniel Park stood up without any drama. He was quiet but powerful. His eyes were steady, and his voice was precise. "This case," he said, "is actually about what happened before the cameras started recording." He didn't look at the jury immediately. Wait until you see what the cameras actually captured. Because the 30-second clip everyone saw online was a total lie. Daniel Park pointed right at the screen and said, "We intend to show you all of it." Then, the video started playing. This wasn't the short snippet that went viral. It was the full, uncut sequence. You could see Tyler blocking Emily and Marcus helping him. You saw the hand on her wrist, the rough shove, and her starting to stumble. That's when Ryan stepped in as a human shield. The courtroom didn't get loud, but you could feel a massive shift. It was a quiet realization as context finally replaced everyone's assumptions. If you're enjoying this so far, smash that like button right now, and tell me what you think of this evidence in the comments. Next, Margaret Dawson was called to the stand. She walked up with a steady, confident pace, looking calm but firm. Once she was under oath, her voice didn't shake. "They were blocking her on purpose," she told the court. "They thought it was a joke." She glanced at Logan Brooks for a second before looking back at the lawyer. "They grabbed her and pushed her. That man," she nodded toward Ryan, "stepped in to stop it. Nothing more." When the prosecutor tried to suggest her age made her memory fuzzy, Margaret didn't back down.
"I've lived long enough to know the difference between someone helping and someone hurting," she said. "I know what I saw." But here's the crazy part. The prosecution was about to try a really dirty tactic to discredit the victim herself. Then it was Emily's turn. The walk to the stand felt like it took forever, but once she sat down, she felt focused. She was used to high pressure from her shifts at the hospital. "I had just finished a 32-hour shift," she said quietly. "I was exhausted and wasn't looking for a fight." She described the blocking, the mocking, and the moment she lost her balance. "I didn't ask him to step in," she added, looking at Ryan. "He did it because it needed to be done." The prosecutor tried to claim she was too tired to remember correctly. Emily didn't blink. "I've treated patients while more tired than that," she replied. "I know the difference between confusion and reality." Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss the next part of this trial. Ryan took the stand last. He didn't rush his answers or say more than he had to. "I saw things getting worse," he explained. "There was physical contact without permission, and she was losing her balance. I stepped in to prevent further harm." When asked about his background, he kept it simple. Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps, 3 deployments, injured in combat. He didn't talk about the explosion or the months of painful recovery. He didn't mention the nights Rex stayed awake with him when he couldn't sleep. But when asked about the dog, his voice sounded more grounded. "Rex was my canine partner," he said. "He's saved my life more than once." The courtroom absorbed that differently, seeing it not just as evidence, but as context. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the final witness was someone nobody expected to see. Finally, Daniel Park called his last witness. The man who stepped forward hesitated. His movements were slow and careful, as if every step he took carried a weight beyond the distance itself. It looked like the short walk to the witness stand was the hardest thing he had ever done. Wait until you hear what this man had to say. His name was Aaron Whitaker. He was in his early 30s, tall but with a slight slouch that made him seem smaller. His dark hair was cut short and looked a bit messy and uneven at the edges. If you looked closely, you could see a faint